Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, energy is a big issue nationally. It's also a big issue in Pennsylvania. But first, let's get to the big stories of the week.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we have a couple of reporters joining us today, and we're going to chat about the big stories of the week. Joining me is Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with Spotlight PA. Angela, let me start with you. I'll tell you, the lieutenant governor is pretty important, not in the sense of day-to-day, but they can succeed the governor, as some have. And I know virtually nothing about the 12 candidates. You know, we're talking about both Democrats and Republicans in a primary. So I don't know where we should start with this, but you go take it.
I'll give a broad overview, and you're not alone in not knowing much about this race. It has definitely been eclipsed by the governor's race, where there are 10 people in total on the Democratic and Republican side running, and there are 12, as you said, running for lieutenant governor. And if you're wondering about the math there not being even, it's because of the way Pennsylvania elects lieutenant governors. Basically, in the primary, lieutenant governors run on their own, so they don't separately. They don't run as a ticket with a gubernatorial candidate. And then whoever wins the primary then runs as a ticket with whoever wins the primary for governor.
And Mark, there have been efforts to change that over the years, but nothing has happened. I think that takes a constitutional amendment. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it also, I mean, there's been efforts to even just get rid of the office, too.
Right.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that lieutenant governors can succeed the governor. I mean, we have one case with when Tom Ridge left the governorship to become director of Homeland Security, Mark Schweiker, the lieutenant governor, became governor.
That's right, took over. And you do want, one of the reasons why some people are pushing for a change in the process is because you do want the governor and the lieutenant governor to get along. And there have been very odd pairings in the past, most recently between Governor Wolf and former Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack, who reportedly did not get along and had a very icy relationship.
Yeah. You know how I look at it? If the governor gives the lieutenant governor a special assignment, he obviously, lieutenant governor presides over the Senate and chairs the Pardons and Parole Board, but if they give him something to do, like Governor Wolf gave Fetterman, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, the task of doing a report, I think, on the legalization, do I have that right, of recreational marijuana?
Yes, to do a report on where people stand across Pennsylvania on the issue of legalizing adult use, recreational.
Adult use, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there can be synergy between the two. I think Jim Collier was also an intrinsic part of the Corbett administration before Governor Wolf. But as Angela says, there can be odd pairings, and there can also be, if one of the parties nominates someone who is toxic, I don't know that we've seen that in the past, but you have to think about what happens if there is a toxic lieutenant governor candidate on the ticket in the fall.
Well, hopefully we'll get more information because they're virtually unknown. But Mark, I want to turn to another subject, child sexual abuse lawsuits.
Yes, so this is a very, very long-running issue in Pennsylvania, but the core of it is that people who were abused sexually as children have lost, in many cases, the right to sue their abusers or any institution or anyone who may have cooperated in covering it up. And what they've wanted for some time now, and what they've gotten in other states as well, is the opportunity to sue, to legally have that right to sue restored to them. And so it just cannot get through the legislature. It's being held up in the Republican-controlled Senate right now. And what it would require without legislation is a constitutional amendment. And so there is a constitutional amendment on track for that. Potentially next year it could land on the ballot if it can get through the legislature one more time. But the governor is pressing the legislature to pass a bill into law to allow this, to allow people to be able to sue.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, and one of the things that he has said is that if the Senate does not pass the bill by June, then he is going to call a special session on it this summer, which obviously makes quite a few people nervous because they want to be home. These legislators want to be home over the summer running for re-election.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, well, the Democratic nomination for United States Senate took, shall I say, a harsh turn this week. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, there are 4 candidates at the moment seeking the Democratic nomination for the United States Senate. Mark, that was a relatively calm race until a Muhlenberg debate forum, when Connor Lamb and Malcolm Kenyatta really took after John Fetterman in a strong way that's reverberated. Talk about that.
Yeah, so this race, the field had been relatively stable for a long time, and the candidates had kind of stayed in their lanes, more or less trying to establish themselves, with Fetterman clearly showing that he was leading in polls. But it was last Thursday night that Connor Lamb went on Twitter and attacked John Fetterman in a way that we have not seen in this race yet. And then that played into the Muhlenberg forum on Sunday, where Fetterman did not attend. And so there was an empty podium there, and Malcolm Kenyatta, a state representative from Philadelphia, and Connor Lamb, who's a U.S. rep from suburban Pittsburgh, they both went after John Fetterman in multiple ways, but in often pointing to the empty podium there. Fetterman, has said that, look, I'm going to participate in 3 televised debates. I've appeared at a bunch of forums already. He has missed some forums. But it does show you that there's less than 6 weeks left until the May 17th primary, and Fetterman.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the issue that they brought up.
It stems back to a 2013 incident. At the time, Fetterman was the mayor of Braddock, and he has said that he heard gunshots outside of his home, and so he got into his car and noticed that there was somebody, covered up with goggles and, a hood, and so he couldn't really see, and he pursued that person. It turns out it was a black man who was running, and that he has communicated with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he basically said that Fetterman held him at gunpoint.
With a shotgun, pointed it at him.
Pointed at gunpoint until police could get there.
Right, and Fetterman's story has been the same since 2013. A TV station in Pittsburgh, WTAE, did do a story on this right after it happened and interviewed both Fetterman and Chris Miaris, the jogger, or the person who Fetterman caught. But Fetterman has said, I didn't know the race of the person I pursued. I heard gunfire, I was worried. I didn't point the gun at him, it wasn't loaded, and the safety wasn't even off. So they've both called each other liars. Miaris has said he knew I was black. He loaded the shotgun. He pointed it at me. Like I said, Fetterman's story has been the same since then, but this is being used against Fetterman. It was used against him last year as well by an organization that supports black candidates and running ads on it online and on radio stations that are popular with black listeners.
And what's interesting is that race was relatively quiet, and there wasn't a lot of negativity like the Republican Senate nomination, which has been brutal, particularly between Dave McCormick how do I put this? Dr. Oz, the TV celebrity. But we also have a number of other candidates, you know, who are trying to emerge out of this. A real estate developer named Jeff Bartos. Mm-hmm. And McCormick has had the lead, although I take it in the last Emerson poll that came out, it looks like Dr. Oz had a slight lead.
Well, look, I do think that field now has become almost, it's been actually difficult to watch because they have gone really, it's become a very sort of guttural fight to the top. And it's not just happening at the U.S. Senate level. We're seeing it happening on the Republican side at the governor's in the governor's race in particular. On the Democratic side, Josh Shapiro does not have, any competition. So, and at the governor's level, in the Republican field, what you've seen is the candidates going after each other on how truly Republican they really are.
How conservative and Trump support, right?
And Trump,
And
definitely.
we're talking about Lou Barletta, a former congressman from the Lehigh Valley who was also a mayor up there, and Doug Mastriano, a real Trump supporter. At any rate, we're out of time. I want to thank you for the update. All right, coming back, we're going to take a look at energy. It's a big issue in the country, and of course, it's a big issue in Pennsylvania as well.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, we're going to talk about energy. It's a huge issue nationally, and it's a huge issue in Pennsylvania. Joining me to discuss energy at several levels is Terry Fitzpatrick. He's the president of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. Terry, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here. All
right, we got a whole bunch, several issues to talk about. The big issue in Pennsylvania right now is RGGI. First of all, what is RGGI?
RGGI is an acronym, RGGI. It stands for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's a voluntary effort involves 11 states in the Northeast, where they set up a cap-and-trade program for carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. The idea is to limit emissions from those plants by selling these allowances and setting a cap on them, which should reduce pollution. That's the whole idea. But it's a very controversial idea. Republicans in the legislature are adamantly opposed to it. The Wolf administration is pursuing it through a rulemaking process.
Right.
And right now, that process is about concluded. It's in the courts right now, with the issue being, is it legal for Pennsylvania to join without specific enabling legislation? The Wolf administration claims it has that authority under a law known as the Air Pollution Control Act. The Republicans in the legislature say, no, you need a special law to do that. That's what all the other 11 states have done, and it's not legal to join it unless there's a specific law authorizing it.
Now, you talk about a cap-and-trade program. Mm-hmm. Is this basically a tax on carbon emissions, or is that a bad way to frame it?
Well, that's become a big political fight. The Republicans are saying it's a tax. We do have other cap-and-trade programs. Probably the most famous one was to hold acid rain, sulfur dioxide, back in the 90s. That was set up at the federal level. I don't recall that being called a tax. There is a cost associated with it. Some people can say it's akin to a tax, even if it isn't technically a tax.
Yeah. Well, it's in the Commonwealth Court, and there's a stay on the governor's order, so it's basically not in effect right now. Is that correct?
That's correct, but that's a temporary stay. They're going to be having arguments. We'll see whether that holds up. I'm sure this is going to end up in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Yeah, I would think. Well, look, more generally in Pennsylvania and the United States, the war in Ukraine has really roiled energy markets, and it's heightened partisan differences. And let's take it. Were energy prices higher before? I mean, I think that you explained before Ukraine.
Yeah, they were. I was on the show a few months ago,
right,
you know, in the dead of winter, talking about the high home heating bills that people have and the high electricity bills. And you know, that was basically a function of the fact that we went into the pandemic, demand dropped off for energy dropped off as the economy went downhill. And so prices went down, you know, basic economics, supply and demand, so prices went down. Then we start to come out of that pandemic and the economy really comes back to life in a big way. So all of a sudden the demand for energy went up. So prices were high entering the winter for home heating, for gasoline, for electricity, all of those things. Then comes the war in Ukraine on top of that, creating more uncertainty in energy markets because Russia is a big energy producer, and all of a sudden it's controversial as to whether or not the Western countries should be buying that energy anymore.
Yeah, and we're also a huge producer of natural gas. Are we the second highest or third in the country, I think?
Pennsylvania is the second largest producer behind only Texas.
Texas, I thought that. And that also tends to be controversial, you know, with Republicans more favoring it than Democrats, to put it mildly. Governor Wolf is the progressive Democrat, and he supports it, though he's concerned about pipelines and the environmental, you know, the leakage from them that could cause environmental damage. So is there any change in that? It looks like that natural gas is going to continue to be an important part of the economy of Pennsylvania. I'm not saying that because I'm for or against it. I'm just saying the governor and others have said that.
Well, that's right. But you're also right, though, that there's a big political issue over it. And I think there's a growing movement that says that we shouldn't have any fossil fuels, that we've got to get rid of all fossil fuels. And you know, that leads you into the other issue. I can't talk about any energy issues, Terry, without also talking about the climate change issue.
Yeah.
Because it casts a shadow over all of these energy issues. And you can't really talk about the energy issues in isolation from climate change. Concerns over climate change, they vary across the political spectrum. Folks, Democrats tend to be more concerned about it than Republicans are.
Sure.
And some of the more progressive Democrats really want to end fossil fuels immediately. So they're really upset about the fracking from the Marcellus Shale.
Sure.
And the president now, because of what's going on in Ukraine, has made a commitment that we're going to sell more liquefied gas there.
I'll continue with this. I have a question, and I also want to talk about the future of energy prices, something that's very important. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, Terry, look, there's one aspect of this that gets repeated over and over by, I'll say by centrists, and that is, let's work on climate change legislation. There's no doubt about it, not just legislation, but programs. But in the meantime, we have to increase the production of oil in order to meet the challenge that we're facing from Russia in Europe in particular. Not that we buy a huge percentage of our own oil from Russia. So where does that go?
Well, that's become a big controversy now. That's only added fuel to the debate that was already going on here over the future of fossil fuels. I mean, I think it's put the president in an uncomfortable position because Europe needs fuels now. They need energy. They particularly need natural gas because they relied on Russia for that.
Right.
So the president has said, we'll send liquefied natural gas there.
Right.
Well, progressives in the U.S. look at that and say, we're trying to get off of natural gas. Now we're going to commit to send it to Europe. But it really does illustrate, Terry, something I've said to you before. When you talk about energy, you need to talk about affordability, you need to talk about reliability, and you need to talk about environmental sustainability.
Right.
And you need a balance of all those things. You can't ignore the energy security issue they're having in Europe. And frankly, if some of the progressives who want to stop all fossil fuels, if they succeed in the U.S., we will be like Europe. They have shale gas over there. They're just not developing it because of the strength of the climate lobby there. Where are we going to get those fuels? And frankly, I think we're going to need those fuels even as we move towards more renewables. Where are we going to get them if we don't develop them here? So that is a huge debate that's playing out right now, and I'm sure it's going to go on for years.
Yeah. I mean, basically, that's the rub as I see it. It's the delicate balance between moving forward with, climate change on the one hand, but yes, allowing us to supply the gas and oil that's necessary to run our economy.
That's absolutely right. And Europe finds themselves in a crisis because they did not develop those things, and they've got to get them from somewhere. One of the things I will tell people, it's always been sort of a mantra of mine throughout my public service with the Public Utility Commission and now in the private sector. Don't create policies that create a crisis in the future. I mean, see that coming, and don't do that. That's one of the things I'm concerned about, frankly.
Well, that leads to obviously the important question: the future of energy prices, as if we could predict anything, right? Go ahead.
Right. Well, the outlook, and really I rely heavily here on the federal government. There's a nonpartisan group in the Department of Energy called the Energy Information Administration that analyzes this and puts out forecasts. Their forecast is that the prices are high. They're not going way down anytime soon.
Yeah.
But they should moderate this year and come down some next year. But they also say in their forecast there's more uncertainty than usual, because war is uncertain. What direction is that war going to take? How's that going to affect markets? How is it going to affect the world? That creates an element of uncertainty about what's going to happen.
Well, what happens when you fill up your gas tank at a gas station, that is really creating this huge problem for many Americans, given $70-80 to fill up a tank of gas.
Correct. I mean, and gas prices, if you go back 2 years to when the pandemic first hit, they were down, I think it was $2 and something for a gallon of regular. Now it's over $4 for that. So that's the kind of volatility you've had in those prices. And really, I know there's allegations about is there gouging going on, and there's legal processes to determine that. But the big thing I see is that it's just the market operating, because some of the same dynamic, we're seeing it with natural gas. It isn't just natural gas, it isn't just gasoline. It's natural gas too. Demand goes down, the price goes down. Demand picks up, the price goes up, and then you have uncertainty, you have wars, and the price goes up even more.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. You'll come back and keep us posted on this. It's a huge issue, and it's partly, folks think it's related to inflation and the other issues that our country faces. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay well.